People are just going to have to wonder if that was a photo or if we were indeed just sitting there quietly. But I'm going to start the episode with this question here for you, Aaron.
All right.
How many belongings are still at your, I'll use this phrase, ancestral home?
Um, More than there would be if I still lived there, which is crazy. So I would have all of my current belongings, and there would be a lot less stuff there that I think of more as it used to be mine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, there's I've had this conversation with my parents a number of times, and it goes, "Oh, we need to find a time for you to come down and go through things of yours at the house." And I go, "Get rid of all of it." And they're like, "No, we're not going to do that. You have to come here to dig through all these things. And we're also going to randomly, when we see you on occasion, just give you stuff that you don't want or need." And then my mom gets upset when she gave me my folder that had high school report cards and my practice SAT scores, this year. And I was like, "Oh, great, we got a solo stove. That'll be a great fire starter." And she got upset with me. I'm like, "What am I supposed to do with these things?" I would love to hear the answer to that question from your side, though. My side, I'm hoping yours is as a little bit. I think of it as kind of a silly conundrum, silly little catch-22, I guess, but.
Well, I think it's just like the show Love is Blind or any of those like reality dating shows is ultimately the underlying question that everybody's trying to ask is, yeah, but who's going to cook? Like that's really what they're all just trying to figure out is who can cook, who's willing to cook, how much takeout is going to be involved. That's what they mean by like quote unquote do shit. Like, oh man, he don't do anything. It's like, oh, he just doesn't cook a meal. That's what they're all trying to figure out. I think the question underlying all of those this stuff used to belong to you is yeah, is it cool if I just throw it out? But it's a memory. You got to take the trip down memory lane. Let's talk about it. Bro, literally same scenario. You and me, same boat. Pull out just a tub, just random colored tub of clothing. And it's like, oh, this is all old work clothes that haven't been washed before they were put in the tub. This all just smells like a graveyard. And it's like, just throw it out. 100%, you're right. Old art projects, all of this stuff, just
there's
gone.
100% a duffel bag that, I mean, mine I think would be, I would imagine my mom would have washed them, but there's 100% a bag full of old t-shirts, whether it's from Little League Baseball, from Odyssey of the Mind, from just absolutely from my fifth grade class picnic with all of our names on the back of it and everything. Things that have not fit me since. I mean, the fifth grade shirt fit me in high school because I didn't grow, but now it would be very far out of the realm of possibilities of either wanting to or being able to wear it. Yeah, these things, they can go into a fire somewhere, and that's fine. But yeah, the trips down memory lane and all are it's I just don't understand the concept of it. I've tried really hard to get that out of my personality of just keeping things that that I don't need and all. And so I think I would have a much easier time of getting rid of those things than my mom would. But yeah.
That's hilarious that you're like, yeah, just throw it all out. And they're like, that's a wrong answer. The only right answer is you're coming down on Sunday. But yes, welcome to adulthood to both of us, apparently. And welcome to the Tired Boys podcast. It's a pleasure to be back for another week after the Paulo Brazilian Grand Prix. It was another wet and wacky and wild weekend overall. So yeah, happy to be back. Happy to be here, Aaron. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to get into this week's episode because with it being a sprint weekend and all, we've got a lot to get into. All of the quick hitters are just related to general this week in F1 and everything. So I'll go ahead and just jump right into the thick of it. But first one, I've got to shout out free my man Max and throw a gripe out there. Of course, Charles Leclerc swore in the post-race press conference after the Mexico City Grand Prix. He did receive a fine from the FIA, little 10,000 euro fine, 5,000 of that being deferred as long as he doesn't put himself on the naughty list again. Where Max's penalty was 40,000, and they said, well, the interviewer led Charles into that question. He didn't know better than to not say the words. So Max's penalty is 4 times the amount, and community service. To start off, the fine stewarding that we saw throughout this lovely Sao Paulo Brazilian Grand Prix race weekend. I had to lead into it.
And you said the deferred means that,
So-
based on good behavior, they'll knock that off.
Yeah, they 5,000 of Charles' penalty, which same thing, 20,000 of Max's, so half of the penalty is suspended on the condition that there is no further breach of a similar nature within the next 12 months. So it's a rolling clock, yeah, not just the rest of the season. It's like the driver's penalty points on their license. They only fall off when you get a year out from that incident.
Oh wow, yeah. So a full another season, basically. I mean, yeah. All right, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so, but just the drastic difference in the penalties and everything, I was like, either they've learned that they were being ridiculous, or it's just them out to get Max once again. No. But I mean, I don't know. It was just, it's weird to see such a large disparity in the difference of the ways things were handled with similar situations. And I would say the same across the race weekend here. But before we get into all that, the next quick hitter, something pretty, just an interesting thing that I saw pop up, but the Grand Prix Drivers Association, so the F1 Drivers Association created a public Instagram account, and so I would imagine that is probably just the growth of that Drivers Association and kind of Drivers Union towards being or having a more vocal voice about safety things and concerns that they see, or just beneficial things for the drivers, whether it's something like the why am I blanking on a couple years ago when the cars were all bottoming out because constantly the what did they call that, the dolphin effect or something like that? Yeah,
pretty much.
Where the cars were just porpoising. Sorry, there we go, porpoising, or something like stewarding and rules and whatnot. But I think it's a good thing for them to have a collective public voice. It seems that a lot of the drivers there end up being these kind of little bits and pieces that come out periodically about, this X amount of drivers supported or were against XYZ thing. And I think that allowing them to have that public forum and creating that for themselves is a nice step forward, just in a small way of opening that door to kind of connect with the public through that association level.
Yeah, and it'd be a great place for Max to be able to, put a post out after the race and say, like, they're soft on Charles. I had to clean up a highway. Like, this guy doesn't do as much as I do for punishments. So, yeah, it'd be like a great place to air out grievances reasonably like that.
Well, I would say, in who would, in your mind, if I said the whiniest driver in F1, who would pop to mind?
Shit, when you said whiny, I thought of like football players, like soccer players.
Not that I think any of them are real whiny, but if you had to pick one guy on the current grid, who just pops to mind the most?
Max.
Okay, there you go. No, George Russell is, I believe, the president of the Drivers Association. So I think he would probably be the one in charge of making any admin posts and whatnot. But
Gotcha. Okay, so he'd be doing it on Max's behalf.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, just a kind of a step forward with the Drivers Association. I think it's good when you're looking at kind of all the different issues that the drivers deal with that maybe the public doesn't see from the outside as much, or kind of the repercussions. I mean, whether it's the porpoising or even safety incidents like Carlos Sainz in Las Vegas last year, where the manhole cover shot out of the ground because of the ground force of the car and could have hurt him pretty significantly. There's plenty of things that I think come up that it's good for them to have a public voice on. But something just a little bit lighter than my gripes about stewarding and all. Seeing Lewis Hamilton this weekend get to drive Ayrton Senna's 1990 championship-winning McLaren around the wet, rainy Interlagos track was just a treat. I thought that was a really cool thing for this weekend, and to be able to do that drive in the rain as well is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that must have felt pretty good, honestly, because like not only is it like a beautiful tribute to the Brazilian racing driver, but they love themselves some Lewis Hamilton down in Brazil. So there's almost like this double layer of excitement for the fans there. So yeah,
He's just a citizen.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't even have to take the test or anything. They're just like, Lewis, we love you that much. Please be a part of our country. He's like, sure.
honorable citizen Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, just a double dose of double dose of kind of awesome for those laps in the rain there, and a mighty fine car indeed. That thing is pretty sweet. I mean, obviously I wasn't around, to see him racing it, when he was still alive. But yeah, that was a fine piece of machinery for sure.
I wonder, because he had the wet tires on, I wonder if they get like special Bridgestone, or I to be honest, I don't know who was in the charge of the tires at that point in time, but I wonder if they have like authentic, like same brand and everything for those, or if they just slap on some of those new bad boys onto the car and send them out there in the rain.
That's actually a really good question. I would love to know the answer.
Yeah, just a curiosity. I do not know the answer to that, but those were the quick hitters for this week. Nothing too big, too crazy. Before we jump into the race weekend, though, we do have a little bit of do you work here with some kind of driver suspicions and rumors coming out. So initially, the person who broke that Franco Colapinto was going to be replacing Logan Sargent at Williams, the first person to announce this was a former Argentinian racing driver, Ruben Duray. And so, of course, Franco Colapinto being Argentinian, I'm sure there's some sort of connections back through his kind of coming up into Formula One. But he made a report that Franco Colapinto had signed a deal with Red Bull to be Max Verstappen's teammate in 2025. Of course, we still have to wait and see, but Christian Horner was seen leaving the Williams hospitality suite during the race weekend and everything, so it seems like there is some potential, at least for Franco Colapinto, to find a drive still in Formula One, potentially over with the Red Bull camp. I think we briefly touched on that last week, but some more reports about that. And then for the actual open seat that hasn't been filled in F1, not just shifting people out of current seats, Kick Sauber apparently has brought in a new challenger into the ring here, with Kevin Magnussen being a potential contender to join the team. Like I said, they had the option, Hulkenberg and Magnussen, bring them both into Sauber this coming year. But after Kevin Magnussen's good performance, almost getting points at Circuit of the Americas, picking up a big point grab with a P7 in Mexico City, and some consistent and solid racing, he has piqued some curiosities from the Sauber team, apparently, as a potential option, still along with Valtteri Bottas and Gabriel Bortoleto being some of those top contenders still.
Yeah, it's no surprise that the drivers who are seatless being considered by those, who are in the position to consider as many options as possible. It's a bit curious, I think. To my recency biased brain, teams were, I'm going to use the words locking in. It felt like teams were locking in at an alarming rate, maybe even a bit surprising at when they did it. And I mean in recent years, I'm thinking, yeah, this is surprising that they're just kind of waiting and we're still talking and not much I can do, but just do my best and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, unsurprised to hear that the teams that still need seats filled are considering any and all options available, from drivers that they have footage on, right? That they kind of know what they would be getting.
And I think especially with Sauber being the last team to be kind of securing their driver lineup for next year at this point, without contracts being broken and weird changes happening, they kind of just have the time to just wait and let it ride at this point. I think some of their top options that they couldn't quite work out a contract, like a Carlos Sainz and whatnot, have gone and signed with other teams. Now they're just kind of sifting through, waiting to see if something rises to the top in terms of performance. But based on Kevin Magnussen's early season performances and everything, it truly feels like you are as good as your last race in this instance as a positive, where they're like, oh yeah, 12 penalty points over the last year and a full race ban because of incidents crashing into other drivers and causing mayhem around the circuit. But you've looked really good for the past weekend and a half, man. I don't know. And hey, I mean, Kevin Magnussen, veteran driver, we've talked about why Sauber might want that. But it's definitely a little amusing that that recency bias may be working in his favor in this instance.
Yeah, he might just be the king of spin, too, where he's just sitting there being like, Yeah, but I was just playing the team game. Like, don't you want somebody that's gonna, be down for his teammate no matter what? Like, we are,
Great relationship with Nico. Like,
right.
you already got Nico. Like, we're homies. We're good.
That's what I'm saying. I'm sure he'd be able to spin quite the yarn for himself.
Oh, I'm sure. And Kevin Magnuson is someone who's been his own agent for most of his career, I believe. He handles all of his contract talks and everything like that on his own, as from what I remember reading earlier this year. So for himself, like he's the best one to spin that tail to the team. So definitely some questions still up in the air with Sauber, and then of course the Red Bull seats, whether there will be any swapping around or changes made there. But only a couple weekends left until I'm sure we'll have some things solidified.
Yeah, and it's usually like here's a question for you. They wouldn't wait until after the season, right? It'll all be decided like within.
They might. If I remember correctly, Logan Sargent's contract renewal for the second year with Williams happened just after the season. They kind of, if I remember correctly, he was hoping to have something by like summer break, kind of official and whatnot. And James Valls, I'm pretty sure was like, we'll talk after the season and figure it out. So I'm fairly certain that happened with Logan Sargent. I don't recall many instances of this kind of contemplation in terms of signing a new driver to the team. So if it would be similar, I guess, if they were just in talks with Valtteri about, like maybe, but we've got some options in the back pocket. But you're our number one if you perform well. I guess that would be a more similar position to the Logan Sargent one. But this seems like the pool's kind of open for them, and they're just looking for the best option, whether it's Valtteri or someone else.
That makes sense. So there's nothing that states you have to have your roster done by, the end of like the final race weekend or
No,
anything. It can
I
happen
mean, I
afterwards.
think most teams want to at least lock it in very shortly after the season, because season ends, everyone takes a little bit of a vacation, and then they're back kind of getting things rolling within the team and everything leading into the season. It's not a huge stretch before that preseason testing in March and everything comes back around. So there's definitely an incentive to kind of lock it in quickly after the season.
For sure, for sure. That makes
So,
sense.
but yeah, that was the kind of quick segments here at the beginning before we get into all that there is from this crazy rainy Sao Paulo Grand Prix weekend. But before we do that, we just have to remind everyone who's listening, one, that we appreciate you guys very much. We love putting this out there and are glad to have you with us. But if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, all of those places. We really appreciate it, and we're trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. Whether that will happen at this point or not is unknown, and you are the factor that could make or break that goal for us. So if you're listening, go ahead and hit those like buttons and subscribe buttons. We really appreciate it.
Friends don't let friends not help friends reach their goals. So help us reach our goals. We appreciate you very much.
And back to the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Leading into this, I know we've got a big weekend. We had the sprint race, we had the Grand Prix, we had some qualifying time changes and everything. But do you want to touch on the sprint race first, or just get right into the winners and losers for the week?
Well, let's do the sprint race. Let's do the sprint race first, because winners and losers usually only talks about like the Sunday race week, like the Sunday race day. So yeah, let's talk about like the qualifying and the sprint, and any notes we have there before we get into the before we get into the Grand Prix.
Sweet. So, getting into the start of the race weekend, there were a couple of announcements. So, Max Verstappen taking a 5-place grid penalty for the Grand Prix for taking a new internal combustion engine. So, taking that new power unit, getting the penalty and everything. So, already kind of on the back foot to start the weekend. The other team on the back foot a little bit was Haas, who Kevin Magnussen, who we just talked about, came down with an illness, and Oliver Behrman was announced to be replacing him for the weekend. There are a couple of kind of things that come into play with this, of course. So Oliver Behrman, of course, getting that additional opportunity to drive for the team he's going to be in the lineup for next year. A great opportunity for him, but due to this now being his third Grand Prix of the season, 2 with Haas and 1 with Ferrari, he actually no longer will qualify as a rookie for the end of season testing for the young driver test. So good opportunities for him in the car. I think a very valuable weekend for a young driver to be able to drive and get that opportunity in some really inclement weather and everything here in Interlagos. But that one kind of caveat to it with the end of season testing.
Yeah, but the end of season testing is so young drivers can hopefully put in so they may get a drive. Behrman has a drive.
I mean, Fernando Alonso did the young driver postseason test when he was coming back into Formula One. So I think it's just a good opportunity for junior drivers to kind of get to test a Formula One car a little bit, but also an opportunity for, if you have a young driver who's coming into your team the following year, them getting the opportunity to drive. I believe Logan Sargent had gotten the opportunity to do the end of season testing with Williams a couple years ago before he came in for the full drive that year. And so it's an opportunity where guys like Isaac Hadjar, Dennis Hauger, Zane Maloney, some of those other drivers from Formula 2 will get that opportunity. But in a case like Haas or Alpine with why am I blanking on who's coming into Alpine? Holy cow.
Oh no, and I can't help you out either.
Anyway,
Alpine.
Young drivers coming into those seats. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's gonna drive me crazy.
Damn, dude.
I know.
I was like listening
Jack
intently
Doohan.
to your points,
Jesus
and
Christ.
then
Yes.
you couldn't remember, and then I was lost.
Yeah, so drivers like Jack Doohan, Ollie Behrman, getting that opportunity for next year to come in and get that additional time in the car and kind of get acclimated.
Changeable conditions all weekend. Legendary track. You get to do a full race distance on the Sunday plus a sprint race on the Saturday.
Oh,
if
yeah.
I'm Behrman, I'm taking that trade all day. All day. Okay, so you agree.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
I do. I think it's a super valuable weekend. It's just like a bummer because he didn't even drive 3 races for one team this year. Like he drove 1 for Ferrari, filling in for Carlos Sainz. Then
Sure.
he has the 2 with Haas, filling in for Kevin Magnussen during his race ban, and now for him being sick. So just a weird caveat of that being his 3rd Grand Prix. So a couple of notes with that and Max's engine penalty.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the sprint race, the qualifying was definitely a bit interesting. We saw a number of drivers that I felt like I expected to be at least making it to the top 10 having some struggles. Lewis Hamilton in particular having a pretty rough sprint weekend and race weekend overall. He's someone who has had a lot of success at Interlagos, loves the track. He also has had great drives in the rain and everything. So a kind of surprise for him to be out in Q2. And then, of course, Sergio Perez as well, struggling and getting knocked out in Q2 there.
Yeah, and that kind of continues both for Hamilton and Perez, like really throughout the weekend. Just to touch a little bit on Sunday, we see the same woes that Hamilton has in the sprint qualifying and the sprint just continue into the Sunday as well. Noting like an uncomfortable drive and just like very undrivable. So we end up seeing those struggles for Hamilton in particular throughout the whole weekend as well. So yeah, the Friday session, I guess this is the Friday session really not going that well for him.
Yeah, but we do see kind of a little bit of what we anticipate with the McLarens at the front of the grid for the sprint qualifying. We have Oscar Piastri out qualifying, Lando Norris there. So kind of causing a little bit of just difficult decision making for the McLaren team there immediately. I think we knew that they were going to swap around positions, put Lando up into P1 and Oscar down. They're trying to win a Drivers' Championship. They've already taken the lead in the Constructors' Championship. Not that they're running away from Ferrari quite yet, but with that P1, P2, they go in and they don't make the decision to swap drivers early on, which I find just pretty peculiar. I guess I understand that Oscar took pole position, rightfully so, and everything, but they had a number of opportunities early on in the sprint race that they could have swapped positions. Max and Leclerc are fighting, dropping 2.5, 3 seconds behind them. They have that safety net to swap around, but they don't make that decision, and it's just peculiar to me because we knew that no matter what the situation, they're going to put Lando in front of Oscar because that is the maximum points that Lando can get to fight for this Drivers' Championship. Like, we know it's going to happen. It's the right call if you're trying to fight for this Drivers' Championship. So they don't do it early on, and we kind of see what, in my mind, is one of the first kind of odd stewarding decision-making choices of the weekend, where we have I believe it was Lance Stroll who spins out, Nico Hülkenberg spins out, gets beached up on the side of the circuit in his Haas, and we see the stewards wait for nearly 2 laps. I watched back, and for almost 2 entire laps, the drivers were just driving through yellow flags in Sector 2, I believe it was. We had a gap of over 2 minutes between when Hülkenberg is told to pull over the car by his team over the radio, and a full minute and a half between when he is, or no, sorry, it's like a full 2 minutes between when he's told to pull over and pulls over to when the virtual safety car is called. And so nearly 2 laps have gone by while Hulkenberg's just sitting there on the side of the track, then getting out of his car in just like an unsafe position for him as a driver. And they don't call the safety car. McLaren swaps positions finally, and they immediately throw the virtual safety car out there after McLaren swaps positions. So just a very weird decision, whether it was intentional or not, to like this some sort of like I try to assume that they're like my immediate reaction is like they're out to get my boy, but like obviously thinking through it, I think generally people want this to be even and fair, and so in that case, I think it's just a bad judgment from the stewards to not throw a safety car quickly on that. We've had too many incidents, even in the past couple years, where drivers have been in extremely unsafe positions and we are not calling red flags, we're not calling safety cars, we're not getting that information out to the drivers to protect drivers' safety quick enough. And this is just another instance of that, similar to whatever the rainy race was when I think Carlos Sainz crashed last year and the crane is out on the track and cars are still coming through in the rain, barely able to see. Like,
yeah, when visibility was like 0.
Yeah, like we're just having. It still seems like these things are happening too frequently, and that the improvements to the decision making for these things are not improving at the pace that they should be, which is disappointing. Just because like we talk about it all the time, a rainy race is fun, but we want everyone to be safe. And when there's these situations and everything, even on the sprint race wasn't a rainy race. It's still dangerous enough to have a driver out of the car walking alongside the track, and you just have cars going around under yellow flags. I think, yeah, that was definitely the start of some just kind of peculiar stewarding decisions through the weekend, or maybe not peculiar, but inconsistent decision making across the weekend.
Yeah, and I mostly agree with you, but like we know that it was only a matter of Zach Brown being on the phone with the track steward saying like, hold on, we gotta swap our drivers. Just give us a second. Okay, and they're swapped. Now you can red flag. It was just Zach Brown and Andrea Stella just basically dictating when the stewards would throw it.
Just like Christian Horner in Abu Dhabi 2021.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, they're all just lobbyists. They're all just professional lobbyists is what was going on.
Exactly.
But on a more serious note, you're right. There have been a few examples recently of, you would say, not lazy, but like, lazy is like an adjacent word that you can use. It's like lazy stewardship in very unsafe conditions where like nobody would fault you for like erring on the side of caution when they're like erring on the side of like, I'll get to it when I get to it kind of deal. And it's like, wait, no, throw the flag.
It's a lack of urgency that I think, but it's
that's the word.
It's inconsistent too. Like we that is even more infuriating because you like think that they have it figured out, and then they do something like this where you're just like, holy cow! Like, no, like that should not be happening, and everything. It's just the lack of urgency in certain situations just doesn't make a lot of sense. And looking at the rest of the weekend, there were more moments of that. I mean, but again, inconsistently throughout the weekend. But to kind of close out the sprint race, we do see the McLaren swap positions. We get a moment of weakness from Max Verstappen trying to jump the virtual safety car ending and ending up getting himself a 5-second penalty to drop down to P4 at the end of the sprint race. So McLaren with the 1-2 up top, with Lando getting that sprint win and kind of starting off the weekend even better than they anticipated. Max dropping from P3 to P4 and Lando picking up an extra point in that driver's standings against Max at the end of the sprint race.
Yeah, and key to get that extra point too, like tricky to try and get that swap done in a sprint where there's going to be like no guaranteed pit stops, and you have to figure your competition's going to be, relatively close to you throughout the whole thing without any like forced stoppages kind of thing. So yeah, good on them to get the move done, but yeah, ends up being like pretty easy for them in that regard. And Piastri just having to kind of give up the victory, even though he easily could have won that race. So yeah.
Yeah, and kind of I feel like this is a tough spot for Piastri to be in, because he is so frequently either beating or being at the same level as Lando, with his young driver moments where he has a tough week here or there, but being up towards the top and then ahead of your teammate and having to give up that position to no fault of your own has to be a bit frustrating. And for that in the sprint race, then we end up seeing that in the Grand Prix as well, where they have to swap the driver positions around. I think like that's just a tough spot to be in. I understand Oscar's a good dude and a good teammate, so I'm sure he's fine with the team making those decisions. But yeah, definitely a tough thing with these last few weekends if he is gonna be performing better than Lando, as he has at multiple points of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the difference is like he himself is not in a position to contest the drivers' championship, and he is still significantly contributing to what they hope will be a constructor's victory, right? So like he will be in no small part of that.
Yeah.
And so I imagine, yeah, okay, likely would feel different if he was not already a Formula One Grand Prix winner. Like if they were like, nah, you don't get this win yet, we have to give it to Norris. Like that's when it would start to feel really bad. I think he has victories though. They're not taking any like novelty away from him, and
That's
they're
fair.
like in the crunch time of the season where it's like, buck up, dude. Like there'll be other opportunities. Like we're trying to rat these points like crazy. Like num. We're trying to scrounge what we can. So based on like who he appears to be in interviews, I bet he is invigorated enough, just like going all out for the constructors, and then he'll be able to contest the drivers next year. Like I bet that's no problem for him.
And I think what I would find maybe frustrating is, and of course this being looking in hindsight after the weekend, Max extends the lead in the drivers' championship and everything, and makes it very difficult for Lando to become the drivers' champion. So in a way, Oscar, in my mind, I'd probably be looking at it like I gave up those positions for nothing. If Lando doesn't win the drivers' championship, I mean, he's giving up those positions to his teammate for team play, camaraderie, teamwork, positive energy across the squad, and doing the best that they can. to reach that, but at the same time, you know what I mean? If he's like,
Sort of.
I've been having to swap around with this guy, and say it happens in the next two races as well, where he's
Hmm.
just in better form than Lando is, and
But
then
they
he just
still keep
keeps
trying
having
to.
swap places and things like that. I think it's a difficult position to be put in if it ends up being for naught at the end of the season. But I understand you have to do everything you can in the moment in hopes that that you'll be successful there.
Yeah, because unfortunately, like a dub for him, like there's no value added.
Right.
It's just a victory. It's just points for the constructors. But with Norris, like you get the potential of double dipping, and
Right.
that's like worth it enough for the team. So like I hear your points. I just doubt Piastri's like
I'm sure he's
he
not
he he.
stewing over it,
Yeah,
but
he probably forgot all about it.
yeah, I think I would be in my head a little bit about it just because he drove extremely well this weekend. I mean, to be kind of in at the top of your form on a very tough weekend, you're having to really grind it out and everything. It's and with these drivers, like they are, even Oscar Piastri is a proud and like one, he has that drive to be at the top, and so giving up a position in any instance has to be a little bit difficult just with that internal, like, I'm working just as hard and I'm doing this doing this better in this instance, and so I can't imagine it ever being easy. It makes sense logically, but yeah, I'd have those thoughts in the back of my head a little bit probably. But getting into after this sprint race, we get into the Grand Prix, and once again we have the McLarens kind of in peak form during qualifying. After a very weird qualifying delay on Saturday to postponement to qualifying at 5:30 in the morning in Brazil on Sunday morning. So a pretty bizarre way to start the Grand Prix section of the race weekend.
Yeah, but it's actually better than them just like canceling the running. Like if
Oh
they
yeah,
saw opportunities on the radar to say like we could reasonably hold these sessions like now and now. Yeah, good on them for rescheduling and like retooling it. Because previously, like, well, this was on a race day, so like, what are you gonna do? But like previously at Spa, like it just starts raining, and it's like, all right, we're done. So at least in this scenario, they were able to kind of retool the weekend. So
yeah,
yeah, I say good on them.
oh
The
yeah,
only thing that's crazy about it is the um room for error in the qualifying session goes to zero,
yep,
where normally you have the, you know, you take the fine, have your mechanics and engineers in the garage all night to fix what your stupid driver crashed the car. But at least, like, you have the session then the next
yep,
day. Like, at least you get to drive again. But interestingly, and this is like, this is a fun little wrinkle that we don't get all the time, is the jeopardy surrounding the qualifying session just went through the roof because
oh
we
yeah,
see a bunch of drivers go out under tricky conditions and they effectively ruin their chances for later. So like we see this is where the Williams just their problems go from bad to worse. They have both Albon and Colapinto crashing in stages of the qualifying, and engineers do all they can, but they were not able to get those vehicle, or at least the one, they were not able to get fit to drive again.
yeah,
So yeah, really, really tough Sunday to be sure. Where usually these sessions are broken apart, like for good reason, like Both qualifying takes a particular set of skills, and then the race day, you're employing, I would argue, a different set of skills to a certain degree. So to have to nail both of them in the same day, leaving little room for error, you really saw the teams that were able to nail their marks and make it through. It was like a war of attrition on Sunday, which is crazy. Like see who was out alive at the end of it all.
Yeah, and that's actually, I'd say, a pretty good lead into the winners and losers for this week, because one of my losers was Williams from the weekend, because their engineers just had a brutally tough weekend. You have just both cars, like you said, crashing out in qualifying for the Grand Prix. Colapinto in Q1 and then Albon in Q3. Albon's car, like you said, not being able to be put back on the track. So not only losing out on the opportunity for two drivers to potentially be in there to score points, but for the amount of damage that happens to the car during those qualifying sessions and everything, the cost of that overall is brutal. And then to exacerbate that, Colapinto crashing out in the Grand Prix as well, so his car having to be rebuilt by the engineers twice from the same weekend and everything. Just brutal. I mean, might as well have been in Albon's position of getting the did not start in that spot. So just a brutal weekend for Williams, both in terms of cost, parts. I mean, this is the team that earlier in the season didn't have a second floor that they could put out there for a car, or a second chassis that they could throw out there for a little while. So just a very, very difficult weekend for the Williams squad.
There's the camera shot of the engineers in the Williams garage on lap 32 when Colapinto crashes into the wall. You see his whole side pod is just like caked in, right? And you see this Williams engineer, he is broken. He is shattered in that moment, dude. He's like, we just finished fixing that thing.
He looked like he had a migraine that had just gone away, and he's like, oh nope, there it is. He's just like, oh, just trying to maintain some composure after probably just busting his ass for hours straight to get that car put back together. So really, really tough spot for the Williams squad.
Yeah, and I think that photo really speaks 1,000 words after that. Like, when I saw it, live on race day, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's really tough. But then, once I went back to, watch through the whole weekend and, get all my thoughts and notes together, that it had a whole nother meaning where you're like, oh, shit, no, okay, that's the longest weekend of this man's life. So, yeah, Williams was my loser as well, and I just wanted to bring that up, that engineer just looking... Just the 1,000-yard stare, dude. Just dead.
Just so much pain inside in that one. Picture's worth 1,000 words, but
for sure.
For my second loser this weekend, it was Lando, just because he ends up coming out of the weekend with an even larger gap to Max in the Drivers' Championship after he gets the win in the sprint race. Max gets knocked down a position there. He picks up the extra point and all. Things are looking real good. Qualifies in pole position, raring and ready to go, and then ends up with Max finishing in first with his and the team's decision making, with pitting for the new Inter tires just before the red flag ends up coming out for Colapinto's crash. It's just has to feel very discouraging for him after kind of doing, like we said, everything they can. They're swapping drivers' positions. They're starting at the top of the grid in both qualifying sessions on the front row, and it just ends up in an even bigger hole than he was with only 3 races to go. Definitely a tough spot when it comes to that championship fight for Lando.
Yeah, and you hear over the radio when the safety car is coming in, he's asking his engineers. He says, "Well, they all get a free pit stop then, no?" And the engineer's like, "Yep." Basically, confirming to each other, pretty much the worst of fates, where they made their stop very, very costly, and the others getting an insanely cheap one, effectively giving Max a strong advantage in the following stages of the race. And it was Ocon in the restart that he was behind, right? No challenge at all. I think Max has had like much harder restarts to deal with. In the wet, like you're not you don't have this like dynamism. You're kind of in the advantage being the follower. So yeah, I think Max was able to garner many advantages once the Colapinto crash came in about halfway through the race. So it was, lap 32. That's around about half distance, a little less. I know we did the magical number, one less than 70 laps. So yeah.
Yeah, but I think the other side of that is that Lando kind of was making that decision to come in to switch to the inters and everything, and I think like it wasn't just his team calling him in. Where on the other side of that coin, George Russell is adamantly telling his team on the radio, like, you can go back and listen to it. He's like, we should not be pitting. I do not want to pit. Like, there's going to be a red flag. I know there's going to be a red flag. Like, let's not pit. And they're just like, box, 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 box. And it's like, and then immediately after the red flag, he is fuming on the radio. And understandably, I mean, sure. Just 4 laps after he pits, that red flag comes out and everything. So Lando being on the other side of that, making that decision where he wanted to pit, I think kind of exacerbates that just tough weekend, because he has to be kicking himself for making that call. In particular as well, his counterpart, Oscar Piastri, is on his team radio frantically sounding like concerned about the race and what they're driving in. He's on the radio on the other side being like, there's standing water all over the track. We shouldn't be driving in this. This is so dangerous. They need to red flag it now. Lando in his post-race press conference is like, they shouldn't have red flagged it at all, except there was the crash. So, like, yeah. And it's like his counterpart is saying the exact opposite when it's coming to it. So yeah, for my second loser for the weekend, just Lando. Coming into Brazil, and especially having those kind of legs up after the qualifying to come out of it further behind is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He was my loser on the weekend as well. Did not go well for him, and one of these like weird weekends where, like you had said, everything's going really well until it doesn't, and you just look up and you're like, wait, I'm further behind than when we started, but I was on pole position.
Yep.
So yeah, things just going from bad to worse for Lando. It's gonna be tough, very likely, to bridge that gap. If you figure okay, let's say he does win every race. If Max gets second,
Oh
right?
yeah, Max at this
The
point needs to score 25 points total across the last 3 races to guarantee a win. So
Yeah, that sounds tough.
he, yeah, so it's a position I don't. I imagine it would be almost difficult for Max to finish further back or far enough back for that to happen, and that would be with Lando taking fastest lap and race win in all of
Hmm.
those, including the sprint race that we have left.
Right, showing his math for the bonus points on the back as well.
Yeah, so
Right.
tough. Yeah, like it's not going to be. It already was a difficult climb to make, and now has become a mountain or a pretty steep climb pretty quickly. That gradient just heading right uphill.
Yeah, very tough weekend for Lando in particular. I wouldn't say so for McLaren, because I mean they're still scooping up points overall. They're
Oh yeah.
still looking pretty, but yeah, Lando, definitely not pleased with this weekend. I'm sure. But yeah, so those are the losers here for the weekend, and because I'm pretty sure you copied my homework, I'm gonna tell you my second winner first. Yeah, I had Max. On race day, I gave you a thumbs down in the chat for your legendary comment about Max because I was like, bro, was it really though? On second watch through and going back and like paying more attention to his race, yeah, I think he did drive a pretty lights out race on Sunday. Seeing how many drivers had such difficulty, seeing the challenge that it posed to many of the other teams and drivers, like not many people able to get it right.
Yeah.
Even drivers that are considered to be wet racing aficionados or whatever they say. They're having issues. You know, Alonso's bouncing around, Lewis Hamilton's bouncing around. So it does seem like, and also his first 10 laps were insane. I think
Oh
he got
yeah.
like 10 overtakes in the first 10 laps. A lot of them were made. I think 7 to 8 of them were done on the first lap. So he had a wild start, took way more risk than anybody else did on like in that first phase of the race, like the lap 1 to 5 marker. He was using specifically turn 3 insanely well. Like he was willing to take like a wider line through turn 3 in a lot of his opportunities where like other drivers were like hugging a little closer to the apex. So he was taking more risks and just driving better. Like I don't know what else to say in that regard. So where I previously thought like whatever, like he's just taking advantage of the rain, like fine, everybody's out there just like on tiptoes anyway. Like this guy's trying to win a championship, like yeah, of course he looks good. And then once the like pit stop shenanigans, I'm like whatever, like he just gets a free pit stop, like who cares? But his first stint of the race was phenomenal, and it secured him the opportunity and the advantage to make the gains that he did in the late stages of the race. Had it not been, if he got stuck behind traffic like everybody else did, like Leclerc did after his first pit stop, I mean, it's over. He
Oh yeah.
doesn't get to have that day. So upon further examination, I may want to rescind that big thumbs down that I gave you and remove my jaded glasses and say like, yeah, all right, that was fine, I guess.
Yeah, fine, I guess. But now, I mean, looking at it, uh, I was looking at it also through the lens of like Max's first podium was at the 2016 Brazilian Grand Prix. They referenced it a couple of times, but another rainy day,
Mm-hmm.
only to be beaten by the two silver arrows of Lewis and Nico out in front, but driving a phenomenal just drive beyond his years and everything at the time as his first season, I believe, in the Red Bull team. Just this drive, like you said, seeing him early on, he I think gets like almost 5 or 6 places just off the start, and he's finding those spots and just having that control of the car that other drivers struggled to find that line throughout the weekend. I mean, you see him making these moves that no one else, or going to sections of the track that no one else was really willing to. And I think it just speaks to a couple things. One, just his talent, especially in the wet weather. I think that we heard the Alpine drivers talk about it. The wet weather can really level the playing field when it comes to racing. That's a common thing that gets brought up. But also, I have to give a lot of credit to the Red Bull team because I think this shows that they're working out the issues with the car. If this race had happened 2 months ago, when they were still struggling to figure out where they went wrong, why the car was falling further and further behind with their development in this fight. Like at that time, both Checo and Max were extremely uncomfortable with the car. I can't imagine without the changes that they've made recently that Max would have had the trust in the car and that feel to even be able to put this kind of drive in. So it really is a kind of a meeting of just a couple of things that blossomed into just his ability to go crazy this race and go from P17 to P1.
A convergence of the apex of the vortex of the winds. It's all very scientific. I won't get into it right now, but
I appreciate it. That's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Well, how about your second winner for the week? Because I feel like it's probably the same as mine again, based on your comment.
Well, yeah, we definitely know it's the same as yours because you copied my homework. So our number one winner has to be Alpine. An insane weekend to consider from a team that has like literally been nowhere all year. That race in Brazil was a $50 million race for them. They go P9 to P6 in the Constructors' Championship. So barring like nothing else changes.
That's the difference?
That's the difference in monies that they will win at the end of the year. That is literally a $50 million race like podium for them. So, I mean, they are over the moon. They must be. I don't know. Like you really can't say anything else. The racing spoke for itself. They nailed
have to
it.
Have like some bonuses or something in their contract for how hard both of them are cheesing.
I hope so, dude.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. I didn't realize. I knew it was a lot of money. I didn't realize it was $50 million. Mm-hmm. That's unbelievable.
Or like close there to it.
Well, yeah, I would assume there's some slight variations, but no, that's unbelievable. And yeah, they had a weekend that I don't think even they could have dreamt of. There's no doubt in my mind that this was the furthest thing from their expectation, especially after the sprint and everything. I mean, Pierre Gasly had a nice sprint qualifying up in P7 for that, but Ocon was down in P17 from the sprint qualifying. He's out in Q1, just really not looking like he has the pace. Pierre's able to hold on and get a couple of points in the sprint race, hold on to that P7, but yeah, Ocon was not really anywhere close in that first part of the weekend. but the wet weather comes out, and he had a great qualifying up in P4. Yuki Tsunoda with as well with a great qualifying up in P3. A couple of out of position drivers, and he really just took advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, it's really fun to see the changeable conditions, and I don't know if I'd be able to like name them all, but there is a handful of drivers on the grid who would be very excited to hear that their race day is going to have rain or some type of inclement weather mixed in, because like you had talked about, rain is or can be a pretty good equalizer on the track where everybody begins to deal with like the same issues, and really no matter how good your car is, like the conditions are still like very tricky to drive, so the scale gets tipped way into the favor of like I guess you would say skill expression, and like driver input has way more to say than your car, your team, or your pit stops or anything like this. So your fate kind of gets put more in your hands, when you're encountering a race day. And I would imagine Gasly or an Ocon, sure, at the start of the day, they're kind of like, oh yeah, like this could help us out in a few different ways. But you're right, probably the furthest thing from their mind was a double freaking podium.
Yeah, and also I have to toot Ocon's horn just a little bit as well, because you said Max had gotten by him pretty quickly, which he did on the second restart.
Sure, that's the one that was in my mind when we were talking about it.
No, but I mean, which of course Max, like in that second restart, just had him pinned, but the first restart, Ocon maintained the lead and held it for quite a while. He put, I think, a 3.5 second gap between him and Max from being out front there in the Alpine before the safety car comes in to bring everything back to even. But Ocon, like he led, I think, 15 laps of the race and had a really, really good kind of second section of that race after the red flag there. In comparison, I saw a stat, so he has now led 15 laps of the season, where Checo he's led 1 lap this season. So for Ocon and the Alpine team, like it's pretty unbelievable. Neither driver had finished in the top 8 at all this season up until this race. So just a massive boost for the team, but and of course the money as well. As long as things stay kind of as they are, which is still, it's now pretty tight with them, Haas and RB still for the last couple races here.
Yeah, they put themselves in close company for sure, but yeah, you're dead on. I'm happy you brought up that correction, because I was thinking of the second restart after Carlos Sainz brought the safety car out. So yeah, that's my bad. Yeah, we got to give Ocon his flowers. Leading 50 laps. 15 laps. Yeah, very solid. So yeah, Alpine, the winner for the weekend here. We had Max on the top step of the podium, P1, Esteban Ocon, P2, Pierre Gasly, P3. Very exciting for them. Albon did not start the race. His damage was too severe. They weren't able to get him back into it. Stroll did not start the race. He crashed out. The damage
to his ego was too severe.
Too severe, for sure. Yeah. On a recce lap, crashed into the wall. That was brutal.
But not even that. Like, he spun out, and that wasn't the end of it. he goes and he gets himself back going, and then beaches himself in the gravel trying to take a shortcut.
Right.
Oh. It's so brutal. And after the team rebuilt his car for the race, for him to go out there and do that on the formation lap, just awful.
Well, he tried to take himself out by putting it in the wall, realized like, oh, this isn't broken enough. They're still gonna make me drive in this garbage. So then he just drove into the sand pit, and they'll have to dig him out that way. So yeah, a couple of did not starts, and then throughout the race we had Colapinto, Sainz, and Hulkenberg crash out. So a decent amount of mayhem and carnage going on. It was wild. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty exciting race. The just sadness that increased if you were a McLaren fan was kind of funny. Just the doom and gloom coming through, but lots of really fun storylines. Yeah, I think the Red Bull points, or I guess you would say the V-carb points, being kind of out of position, being able to take advantage of the weekend. I think that's really solid. But yeah, bunch of fun storylines. Although I think the tension for the drivers' championship may have fizzled out a little bit with
just a little bit, I'd say.
Yeah, with the results.
Yeah, and it's tough because I mean, obviously, like, you want it to go up to the wire, but after such a crazy weekend like that was that was one of my favorite weekends in terms of racing that I've seen in quite some time. Just seeing kind of the out of position drivers, like the two Alpines on the podium. It takes me back to some of the crazy races, like Pierre Gasly getting his first win and Ocon getting his first win, and Danny Ricks getting the win in the McLaren a couple years ago when Max and Lewis took each other out. Like, these kind of wacky weekends create for some really cool storylines a lot of times, and so it was really a blast. But I did want to kind of come back a little bit and just touch on a couple of those other moments, though, with the stewards that I just found kind of bizarre. And I'll say the qualifying, Max getting ending up in P12 and not getting to finish his lap and everything from Lance Stroll. I'll say Max, at the pace he was going, didn't look like he was really improving on his time and everything. He may not have made it into Q3 anyway, in terms of when the yellow flag and everything came out. But nonetheless, Stroll crashes in that Q2 of qualifying, and it takes quite some time for them to decide to red flag that. I think it was about 40 seconds of Stroll just being there on the side, where, again, they just don't make the decision quickly. Whereas when Colapinto crashes in qualifying, the red flag comes out very, very quickly. And then in Q3, with the crashes that we saw from Sainz from Alonso and Albon, they're immediately red flagging the race, or the qualifying session as well. Like, there's just that weird inconsistency that we saw there from them again in that instance. And then the final one, which was a peculiar thing that we I don't know why that's my favorite word of the day, is peculiar.
Word of the day.
But I must have read one of those SAT papers that my mom sent me.
There you go. Right as it was on its way into the garbage bin, you just caught the word peculiar as it flew into the trash.
One of those vocabulary words. But the start infringement and everything at the beginning of the race, like, you have Lando and George end up getting investigated and post-race penalties. We were talking about it a little bit as the race was kind of starting and all, but I or at least I was yelling into the void in the Discord channel. But I find it strange that they don't have they seem to have across the sport so many things that it's like this certain type of breach, this infringement, this forcing another driver off the track, gaining advantage off the track. They have very specific penalties. They're like, this is a 5-second, this is a 10-second, like, this is how it is across the board. But then when we have situations like this where it's a breach by whether it's the team not providing information to the drivers quickly enough, or there's some sort of weird team breach of some sort, there seems to be no, just like kind of it's up to the wind to decide like what penalties may or may not come. Like I don't get how they have such consistency, or at least are trying to, in their decision making and stewarding decisions and all. And then something like this, they're like, they know that they did the wrong procedure immediately, and then they just have they're being investigated for this for the first 15 laps of the race, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, forget that little investigation, we'll just decide later, sorry for keeping you on the edge of your seat there. Like, I would have been happier with hey, there was a start infringement, just straight from the get-go, we'll figure this out after the race. Like, I, of course, at the time, wanted Max to get an advantage out of it. But if they had just flat out said, hey, this is a team penalty, or this is a team breach, then we consider it in that realm. Mm-hmm. Penalties will be decided after the race. Like, that would have made sense as well. But to just kind of keep us tantalized about what's going to happen, and then to just be like, just kidding, we'll tell you later. It's like, I was not impressed with the way that situation was handled either. No one really seemed to also know the rules at all. Like, even on the broadcast, the broadcasters are like, well, like, I think there's supposed to be, like, it said start aborted on their things, but like, does it normally say that? I don't know. Like, there was so much confusion around it. It was just quite a little wandering path they took us on there.
Well, I've got a bunch of stuff to say.
Go for it.
I'm glad that it didn't just immediately come down on Lando. Yeah. I'm glad that they were like, hold on, we actually don't know what the right answer is here. We need input from everybody to actually see what happened. It's not a star procedure that I've ever seen before, so it's right. Like, it seems reasonable to me that they want to use it as like maybe a precedent-setting incident. So if something happens like this in the future, they can look back and say like, okay, well, how did we penalize McLaren? Oh, well, we figured out it was just like a communication error. So what we learned is it shouldn't penalize the driver. We should some way have to like penalize the team. I like that they took a step back, understanding they didn't have all the information, and also understood that they were not going to get that information there live during a race when other things were happening. So ultimately, for something that, and it seemed like everybody was in agreement on this, for something that shouldn't have been a driver penalty, it's glad to hear that it took the time necessary so Lando's chances were able to be ruined by themselves during the race and not because of some weird misunderstood
Yeah.
start procedure that would only happen on a day like that where like everything is confused already. So you kind of have to take things, if you're like the rules committee in that regard, you kind of have to take things with a grain of salt. So I'm, like I said, I'm just happy that they did take the
Yeah.
time. Um,
Which
in
is
the go
fair.
ahead.
Well, I would just I'm curious like what your thoughts are. Like we haven't seen a situation like this necessarily before, at least you and I watching, where it's this very peculiar like start situation and everything.
It
Um,
was the one where Lewis was the only one on the grid. That one I remember. That was pretty wonky,
yeah, but that
but no one
wasn't
broke
like
any rules.
right. That was just up. It's starting to rain, and Lewis was the first car on the grid, so everyone
Hmm.
behind him was like, "What can we lose?" Like that. That was definitely a weird start, but like, don't you think that there should be some sort of like obviously in this? It's very obvious, I think, to everyone in this situation Lando going there and doing an additional formation lap is not benefiting anyone or hurting anyone when it comes to the actual race. Correct?
Right.
Like it makes
Yeah,
no
probably not.
it makes no difference. Everyone is driving what like the only person it maybe makes a difference to is whoever was starting from the pit lane because then I think they didn't do the extra lap, so they ended up with an extra lap of fuel in the car, which I
Hmm.
was like, that's kind of weird, but anyway, like if you can look at it and say no one's gaining an advantage, so this isn't going to be a 5 second penalty, a stop and go penalty. Like we're not going to penalize Lando for something that didn't affect the race itself.
Right.
Why don't you just initially say this will be decided after the race after deliberation? Why leave it up in this like confused state for long enough that like the broadcast was kind of confused by like they're like, well, we still don't know if there's going to be a penalty. Like I would think and that's I guess what I mean. Like we see that there's certain penalties or certain decision making laid out for during the race if a driver does something that gains them an advantage or damages another driver's race.
Right.
But if you're looking at it and saying this doesn't affect the race at all, like why can't you just be like, boom, there we'll decide after and deal out penalties like and just say this will be like start infringement will be investigated after the race like right off the bat. I don't know like
I don't know. I don't know
I
what the right answer is, but what do you think about this? Like, it's not exactly obvious that there aren't advantages to be had and or safety risks to be had. It could just be a question of like everybody's got to be on the same page because God forbid on the other side of the track there's a radio call that allows like a set of marshals to cross the track but land like
oh
you
yeah
get what I'm saying? Like
which is where I agree like
it
determining the
might just
penalty.
be it might just be a safety concern. My thinking is if it genuinely is a scenario that they had not encountered before, yeah, I mean it makes sense to me that it's going to be all confused. And if the commentators like have you ever seen their display of like the info that they have to work with?
No,
It's
I haven't actually.
it's effectively like little text messages that come through, which are just like little status updates. So, and it is their job if any of those status updates initiate a like a qualitative change to the race, like they have to talk about it. And so if those blurbs, if those status updates were saying like decision pending and like the stewards are actively talking about this, they're like it basically be like ignoring what's on the teleprompter. Like they kind of
Yeah.
have to keep us apprised of the situation as long as they were being apprised of the situation.
Oh, definitely.
So
Yeah.
I'm with you. It makes for a very confused viewer experience where you would rather them just mute themselves on that topic, like don't even talk about it if there is nothing to say. Because that's
Right.
ultimately what you're saying is they just were blowing smoke. They were saying nothing
Well,
effectively.
and not even like you're saying, not due to the broadcast and everything. It's not their fault that that's the information. Like the
Mm-hmm.
stewards, with all this indecisiveness about, oh, should we red flag? Should we not red flag? I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna do all weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Like they need to be the ones to go like, and you we have seen situations where it's been a safety concern or something where
Mm-hmm.
Lando Norris hops out of his crashed McLaren and goes and crosses over the track and in
Right.
like which is a breach of their regulations and everything. Like they knew it was a breach. They were like, yes, it was a start infringement. They didn't follow procedure properly and everything. Like the stewards just did a very poor job across the board this weekend, in my opinion, in
Yeah,
terms
sure.
of making a like decisive decision about that. I appreciate for sure that they didn't just willy nilly go, oh, like start infringement. We've that was weird. Penalty here, and just like throw something out. I'm glad that they like took their time to kind of think it through and come to a
Mm-hmm.
decision. Um, I think it could have just much more easily, and for viewership, for the teams, for just everyone involved, just been like, this was a breach of regulations. It was a safety concern. We're going to look further into it after the race. Let's go racing, and
Mm-hmm.
just kick things off in a lot more of a straightforward kind of way there. Um, but yeah, and again, like the stewards and whatnot change from week to week as with the marshals and whatnot as we go circuit to circuit around the world.
Right.
So there's always going to be some inconsistencies that just come from human uh, decision making and everything. This weekend just was quite a bit bad in my mind looking back at it.
Yeah, I think for how changeable the conditions were there, and you nailed the word earlier. There was just a significant or a clear lack of urgency with some of the calls that seemed to be necessary. So yeah, overall, I think I would agree with that. But yeah, I don't think that I was as yeah, maybe perturbed by it all. I just would have been tight if it came down on Lando because in my mind that's not a driver at the front of the
Yeah,
pack in the race car right about to race. I don't think that's his problem.
yeah, I definitely agree, and I think James Hinchcliffe was talking about it as well, where he was like, "There's so many things going through a driver's mind. You're on the front of the grid, you're getting
Hmm.
ready, going through all the pre-race like your routine and everything, and then a curveball gets thrown at you. Yeah, like the communication from the team should have been there. Like, yes, drivers should know the rules inside and out, but in that position, in that moment, to be able to, I mean, I couldn't even think of Jack Doohan's name when I put myself on the
Right,
spot earlier.
right.
To like, only a few of the drivers seem to actually be like Max Valtteri, some of those more veteran drivers who've seen it a little bit more. Were like, we're not supposed to be going. I'm just gonna sit here and
Hmm.
not move, kind of thing. So, um, yeah, like definitely a team communication issue there, and hopefully just in terms of safety again, like that will be something that if we have a similar moment in the future, people will think about and be like, oh yeah, I know what to do here.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely agree. A weekend where, you know, maybe could have done better, but overall, I definitely agree with you. I had thoughts a couple times throughout the weekend. I was like, damn, this might be just the like one of the more exciting race weekends of the year.
Yeah.
So much jeopardy involved, especially like I was kind of like tickling at it earlier, like having qualifying and the race on the same day in like wet track conditions. Dude, that's like it really does not get more exciting than that as far as
Yeah.
like a two session doubleheader. So yeah, I think this one was a real treat. Obviously, if you're a McLaren and a Lando fan, you may not be spending those bucks drinking at beers, but yeah, it was a fun weekend.
Yeah, and I think the only other like I had a couple just like final notes from the weekend,
Oh yeah,
but I
sure.
wanted to just go back to Yuki Tsunoda with his phenomenal qualifying, being all the way up in P3 at the end of the qualifying session. Really hanging on as best he can and picking up a P7 and 6 points for RB was huge with Haas having kind of started to pull away a little bit, and with Alpine's big point swing, they're just 2 points behind Haas, 5 points behind Alpine in the constructors fight, so that's still extremely tight there. And then just big props to Fernando Alonso. I massively respect him for really like he was saying like throughout the race how much bouncing and jolting and the pain he was getting in his back from the car this weekend, but to be like the mechanics fixed both of our cars after qualifying, and then Lando didn't even get his out onto the starting grid to start the race and everything. Like these engineers deserve to see that car come across the finish line. That was a just a impressive kind of feat in my opinion from Fernando there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to the to the engineers on their side of the garage, I think it shows a lot of push, a lot of grit. Because yeah, ultimately they're doing everything they can to go racing, and what Alonso said, I think rings true. They deserve to see the thing that they built cross the finish line, barring whatever pains he's feeling. He's got to get it across. So I think that's big respect from him to the team. So yeah, that's a good shout as well. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, but I think that kind of wraps up any notes unless you have any final bits and discussions.
Not really. I think I threw in everything I had throughout the episode. Pretty much a main focus there, on Max and Lando being the main contenders in the fight. But yeah, overall, no, I think I threw in everything I had.
Awesome. Well, with that, that wraps up the Brazilian Sao Paulo Grand Prix review from this week. We've got a little bit of a break before we head to Las Vegas here for the upcoming race. We'll have that in 2 weeks' time on starting November 21st with the practice sessions there in Las Vegas. At the end of the Brazilian Grand Prix, as you mentioned, Max Verstappen P1, Esteban Ocon P2, Pierre Gasly P3, and pretty tight constructor standings fight still, whether that's for P1 with Ferrari and McLaren or even P2 with Red Bull and Ferrari here at the end. And don't forget Charles, he's not too far behind Lando and the drivers either.
No, not too far back, and yeah, he had a pretty decent weekend as well, finishing one place up from where he qualified. So that was pretty solid for him. Yeah, there's still like a lot of fight to be had. Just not in the drivers for that top spot. Think Max is likely going to run away with it. Let's get these people out of here in a little bit. You want to go through the cool down lap? We've got a day in the life here for you this week.
Yeah, why don't you lead into it for us here? I know you had a good story to get us started with.
All right, so this one kind of flipped me on my head. So on Thursday, Sarah and I had our CPR recertification. So instead of the like normal 3 hour class, she had an in for if you were just going for your recertification, it's like way shorter. You
Okay.
basically just have your knowledge tested, and then you just like go improve like the skill segment of it, and then you're free to go. So the idea is like what normally takes like 3.5 hours, we were gonna be able to get done like before lunch, right?
Okay.
So let's go. So we had that on Thursday. The only caveat was Sarah was like, "Well, one of our old like coworkers is gonna be there." I was like, "Oh, that's fine. Like she's nice enough. Like she's not like a mean person or whatever. It's just like the nervousness of where we used to work together. It
From
was
the
just a high
chiropractors.
yeah, it was just a
Okay.
high pressure environment. So like how we would all be kind of like outside of it, whatever, who knows. So the whole way, Sarah's just like, oh, I'm just nervous, I'm nervous. And I'm like, she can't hurt you. Like
Yeah.
she's just like nothing bad is gonna happen. Or we probably won't even like get to talk to her. Like we probably won't even like get an opportunity. She probably won't even recognize us. Basically just offering up every just like yeah, like it's gonna be fine. Like I don't know what you're worried about. And so, we get there, all good, find the place, walk up, go in, and everybody's very pleasant. Sarah goes to the bathroom. I sit down, and the coworker was already there. She had made her seat, and right when we walked in, the first and now Sarah's in the bathroom, and I just spent the whole car ride stating to her, "She cannot hurt you. I don't know what you're scared of." I sit down, get my bag unpacked, and we're just exchanging pleasantries, just oh, how you been, blah blah blah, and then Kim hits me with this. She goes, "Are you still doing your podcast?" And it stabbed me right in the heart. I was like, "Wait, what?" I was like, "Yeah, we are." Like blah blah blah. Just like almost deflecting in some weird way. Like I didn't even expect the question. So my answer was like it was just
Just
off the cuff, right? And then when like I came to and realized like what she asked me, I was like, wait, like how do you know about that? Because like I haven't seen this person in a long time, right?
yeah, and
So I'm like, yeah, exactly. So I was like,
okay.
how did you hear about it? And she was like, oh, it must have like came up on Facebook one time or whatever. I was like, oh, so like 5 years ago when like I posted it originally like for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And like that's what hit me in my head. So I said to her, I was like, oh, this must have been like 4 or 5 years ago. No, she was like, oh yeah, it was like forever ago. I'm like, man, and I just made a joke out of it. I said, damn, like I'm sorry you had to hear that. And everybody in the room laughed, and then like the subject quickly changed, right? But there I was telling Sarah the whole time, like, don't worry, she can't hurt you. And the second I sit down, she is literally just stabbing me in the heart with a sword with the, like, exact question that I did not expect. Like, believe me, I am not ashamed in any way of, like, the podcast and what we do and what we've done. But those first two episodes, yeah,
Oh
yeah, I hope
man.
nobody hears those.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
they are exactly what you would expect from two people that had never done it before, right? And that's
Oh yeah.
exactly what they were. But yeah, I was like, no fucking way. There is no way that a real person ever heard those, let alone somebody that like I know. Kind of, sort of, right? So that was
Yeah.
just the funniest thing. And then Sarah comes back, sits down, and, nothing's wrong. And we leave, and she's like, oh, yeah, that was really nice. Like, you're right. Kim wasn't. I was like, yeah, well, I got fucking murdered in there. I'm, like, man down, dead on the floor. And you're just like, oh, yeah, that was a nice time.
Oh, it got flipped on you so much,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I was thinking because to be honest, there's some parts of those early episodes that I don't quite recall with like what all we discussed, but I know that you and I had plenty of discussions about you leaving that company and going off with Sarah to start your, and to in my mind to imagine like who knows whether, not that you ever like really badmouthed it, you were just kind of like, no, just like the management didn't really jive with us, so we struck out on our own. I That's where my mind first went, was like, oh my god, did we say something like bad about the like early on in the in the podcast? But yeah, that's funny that she really just like got you right off guard.
Yeah, that's the best way you could put it. It's just right off guard. And no, I don't think there was any bad mouthing. It was just like just that you had to hear any of that like unlistenable content while we were like figuring out what we wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a wild one. Although I got to give a shout out to my EMS guy Earl. Taught us some great CPR. Even in like a shortened class, I actually learned some things that I did not previously to walking in the office. That is like key useful information that I'll be able to use. So that was like really awesome. So overall, a great day. We had a nice little lunch, like up the street. We were just down in Collegeville, nice cute little town area. So we just had a nice afternoon after all that. But yeah, just a little funny story there. But let me hear your day in the life here. Let me hear what you got going on.
Yeah, so mine today, it's today was just a one of those chaotic days at work. It seemed like nothing could go right, and it kind of started last night a little bit. I had just getting hit from like kind of every direction with anything that could go wrong. But it started off with one of my residents being like, my internet's not working, I'm having these issues in the apartment. And I've been working with these routers and cable boxes and whatever for quite a bit now, and had my fair share of gripes about them here on the podcast, but I know how to fix them generally. And so I do all my troubleshooting. The person on the phone with Verizon's like, yep, you should be all good to go. I'm like, thank you, hang up with him. I email the guy from home and I'm like, hey, everything good now? And he's like, nope, still not good. I'm like, all right, so I know how my day's starting off tomorrow. So I get in this morning, I go, I'm like dealing with all this stuff, troubleshooting with a very pleasant but very difficult to work with kind of tech support person over the phone, where just like constantly interrupting me about like, and I'm like, sir, I've done this 100 times. Like, I'm not, like, I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to just, like, walk him through. I'm like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. All of the troubleshooting steps that I've done, because I don't want to be the guy who has to just, like, be, like, I'm trying to save him time. I'm like, you can cross out the basic things. Yes, I have turned it off and turned it back on. Like, and so working with him, eventually he's like, yep, you just gotta replace it. And I'm like, cool. So spent quite a bit of time. He's like, yeah, like I'll send you the ticket to get it replaced. You can go to the Verizon store right by your work. And I'm like, awesome, easy peasy. I get the ticket. He's like, take a screenshot of that ticket. They'll need it. I'm like, awesome. I go over to the Verizon store. And I'm like, hey, I've got a ticket. And he's like, I'm like, this is for my job. He's like, we don't do business accounts here. I'm like, it's not a business account. And he's like, well, what's the name that it's under? And I'm like, give the business name. And he's like, we don't do business accounts here. I'm like, man, it is not a business account. I'm like, what information do you need? I'm like, I have this ticket. The guy told me to screenshot it and to show it to you. He's like, that means nothing to me. And I'm like, they sent me to you. I'm like, what do you need? he's like, what's the phone number on the account? And I'm like, it's our accounting person's phone number. I don't know. And he's like, you don't know the name? I'm like, I just logged into the account on my phone, and I'm like, here's the account number. And he's like, oh, I could have used that the whole time. And I'm like, dude, just tell me what you need from me that is going to be the easiest for you. Like, I have the account. I can log in and give you any information, but you're like putting me on the spot. You're like, what's the phone number? I'm like, sir, just nothing going to plan with that. I eventually get out of there.
Funny.
He hands me the bag with the equipment. I walk out the door. As I'm halfway down with the plate glass windows, the bag tears, the thing falls, hits the ground, and I just go, well, I hope it's still good, and scoop it up and take it with me. So that is a part of the chaos. All the while, our one elevator goes down with a person getting stuck in it. The fire department comes out and has to, like, they're checking with having our maintenance, like, do all this stuff to get the elevator going, which the issue with the elevator had been caused by our maintenance looking for a leak in our plumbing. That is another issue that just popped up yesterday, that we're like, oh, there's this major issue with our plumbing. We gotta figure that out. And so Roto-Rooter's out and like all this stuff, or whoever we called out, like doing all these things. They accidentally trip a switch with the elevator that stops it with this person in it. All they had to do was just like flip a switch and everything was hunky-dory. But it was just all of this happening at the same time, like between like the first 2 to 3 hours of our morning today. And I'm like, this is too much. And it's election day. I was like, I did not have I was like, I'm going to fix this internet thing real easy and then try and follow what's going on in America for the rest of the day. Nope. My plans were in shambles before I could even put them together. But yeah, my crazy work day is my little story for the cool down lap. It was just nonstop chaos, it felt like, throughout the day.
Dude, I'm just like imagining you after he tells you the first time we don't do business accounts, and you're just like looking at the business account name and you're just sweating like, oh god, he's gonna kill me.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I'm like this is just not gonna go. And that's why I was like trying to figure out what information. I'm like trying to explain it. I'm like, no, like we have a bunch of apartments that we pay for the internet for the residents, so it's like normal apartment accounts, I promise you. And like right. trying to explain it all, and he's just like, this guy is like, I told him we don't do this here and he just won't leave.
I'll tell you what the EMS told us. He said, make friends with your fire department because you want to know that they're coming. So if you may have to deal with that guy ever again, even if you think you may have to deal with him one more time in your life, see if he likes cookies or brownies and get him a box and just say, hey, man, let's just start fresh. I'm Aaron. What's your name, dude? And really trying to break through because he sounds like he needs some brownies.
I think we did okay by the end of it because he was trying to see if I would switch my cell phone plan over to Verizon. So gotcha. I think we got past the early little bumps in the road. But
that's so funny.
But
dude.
Yeah, I was like, after dealing, and I just dealt with the tech service guy on the phone trying to troubleshoot it being a bit difficult, and then I was like it is just not my day. But yeah, that is my day in the life, and that wraps up our cool down lap for this week, ladies and gentlemen.
Solid episode in the books. Just wanted to say thank you very much for listening, everybody. We are very pleased to put this out. Tell your friends, tell your family. Fresh episodes the week after Formula One races. New episodes after Formula One races drop that Wednesday morning. So stay tuned for those for our Grand Prix reviews. Thank you very much.
Yep, we'll see you after Las Vegas.
Peace out, everyone.
Bye.